All right, in this presentation, going to be going over um, some of the different sci-fi elements of the film Pacific Rim. This is one of my guilty pleasure movies. The music is great. The fights between giant monsters and robots are great. Nothing else is really great, but it's good. The movie holds together. Um, and it's still fun to watch, even 8 years after its release. So yeah, this is Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim is the eighth film directed by Guillermo del Toro. Guillermo has a fair amount of experience in sci-fi with a lot of overlap into other genres, such as superhero with Hellboy, historical fantasy with Pan's Labyrinth, and his suspense drama, The Shape of Water. Del Toro began his career in the film industry after studying makeup and special effects. I think that having a background in these elements of filmmaking gives him greater vision and ability to um, direct and create within the sci-fi genre. He has been recognized by the Academy, getting writing nominations for both Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water, the later of which he won both Best Achievement in Directing and Best Picture. Just a quick summary of the film. Ginormous creatures called kaiju are emerging from a portal in the Pacific Ocean. Humans use equally ginormous robots called Jaegers to fight the kaiju. The Jaegers are so large they take two pilots that have compatible minds and fighting styles, where they enter into a drift where they link their compatible minds. Using the same mind-leaking technology, humans are able to locate the portal and a way to destroy it. The most obvious use of sci-fi semantics in Pacific Rim are the kaiju versus the Jaegers. Again, giant monsters from the sea battling giant futuristic robots piloted by humans connected to each other through a mental link captures a lot of the elements of the genre. These semantics lead to the possibilities of drifting with the monsters, portals to other worlds, and the improbable mechanics of the different Jaegers. Um, yeah. One of the metaphors used in Pacific Rim is that countries need to protect their borders from threats of foreign invaders. Um, This metaphor will be explained more when we look at representation of race, but just quickly, it doesn't take a large leap from the beginning of the movie to get that the monster aliens represent illegal human aliens. An allegory from the film is that humans are causing extreme damage to the Earth's atmosphere, escalating catastrophic events. In the film, we see kaiju-obsessed scientist Dr. Newton explain that carbon dioxide and pollutants have made the world more kaiju-friendly. Human consumptions of resources and environmentally destructive production has essentially terraformed the planet for the kaiju. In the beginning of the movie, Raleigh says, "When you see a hurricane coming, you just have to move. However, in a Jaeger, it's like you can fight a hurricane." Later, we hear the different sizes and types of kaijus referenced as Category 1, 2, and so on. So there's a couple of similarities between how hurricanes and the kaijus are talked about and categorized as catastrophic events. The ideology of the film is strength and survival in numbers, uniting of nations against one global threat. For both the aliens metaphor and the natural disasters allegory, the ideology is the same. Nations cannot look at people from other countries as a threat or the other. We must accept each other to learn and grow from different experiences and cultures, not isolate ourselves to protect ourselves from the unknown. And we must find a long-term solution together for climate change. Only working together as a human race can we commit to making a real change for Earth's atmosphere. Looking at gender representation, for females, we really only have Mako Mori to look at. Mako's story is that she was alone and orphaned during a kaiju attack when she was a small child. Stacker rescued her and raised her as his own. Stacker, while proud of Mako's intelligence and her accomplishments, is overly protective of her when it comes to being a Jaeger pilot. When she finally gets the chance to pilot a Jaeger and fight, she struggles with controlling that tragic childhood memory. Even the memory of this pain and fear is something she needs to be protected from. While Raleigh, who was drifting with his brother when he died, was able to keep his memories and emotions under control. Her relationship with Raleigh is something we will discuss soon when we look at the representation of sexuality. For Mako, who is vulnerable, needs protecting, and is a character dependent on a relationship with the male characters, every single male in this film is a macho man who needs to prove his macho-ness. From Stacker, Raleigh, Chuck, and both of the scientists in their competition with each other need to be the best, in charge, and right all the time. They have their own style of charm that helps them be at the top of their field. So while the one female character we get a real good look at needs protection and has to prove herself, and a lot of her character identity comes from her relationship with men, every single man has individuality and is strong and can fend for themselves and has a personality all to their own. So going into that, there is a lack of diversity and representation of sexuality. The film is very heteronormative, with the only real relationship we see being one between female Mako and male Raleigh. Even though that we get glimpses of different cultures and ethnicities, there is only one hetero relationship that we see. A lot of the film takes place on a military compound, and I think that environment encourages the heteronormativeness of the film. In the Mako Raleigh relationship, we see it is actually important to understanding the film's view on sexuality and Mako as a character. As mentioned earlier, Mako's character identity is tied to both Stacker and Raleigh, getting the opportunity to play White Knight for her. She doesn't have really any individuality to her character, since her character is so closely associated with two of the male characters. And in this clip, there's just a little bit of, you can see Raleigh takes off his shirt and the look he gets from Mako in terms of being sexualized, and the first attraction between the two is very physical. I'm just going to go to the next slide, though. As far as representation of race, I'm going to focus again on Mako, as she's really the only one we get a in-depth look at, and the kaiju. I do think it is significant that out of all the alpha males, the one officially in charge is Stacker, a black man. I appreciate the representation, and even better, he isn't given any outright stereotypes of the race. Instead, he has stereotypes of a leader. He's no nonsense and has a strong sense of command. So even though he does play into a commanding stereotype, um, his race isn't played on other than just a representation of a strong black male leader. Looking at Mako as the representation of Asians, she is good at martial arts, along with all the other Asian candidates that are tested to be Rally's drift partner. She is very academic and has a high intelligence, as she is the one that compiles different stats and analysis to generate that list of drift candidates for Rally. You get the impression she has done similar work for Stacker, as she is often at his side with a tablet or modern clipboard, taking notes and entering data. She is also mild mannered and very respectful, especially towards her elder Stacker. Even though she was adopted, she is portrayed acting on standards and values held by Asian communities. And then coming back to kaiju as a representation of illegal immigrants, which isn't a specific race, but more of a generalization of the other. After the Jaeger program is decommissioned, countries instead begin to build massive anti-kaiju walls along the borders. While each country attempts this tactic, it is clear metaphor, or the wall, between the United States and the Mexican border. Both walls have the attitude of we need to keep them out, protect ourselves, resources, and communities from the aliens. Something interesting about class representation in this film is that Del Toro purposefully excluded civilian casualties. We see the Mako flashback in danger and a city preparing for an attack, taking shelter, but in the actual fight or attack scenes, the streets and buildings are empty. As for actual representation of class, there are a couple of examples we can look at. As discussed in the previous slide, after the Jaegers were decommissioned, the kaiju defenses resorted to building walls. Rally, as an ex-Jaeger pilot, joins the working class force in wall construction. When he is re-recruited back as a Jaeger pilot, Chuck Hansen, another hotshot pilot of Jaegers, makes backhanded insults towards Rally about the type of work he resorted to. Rally's work and lifestyle as a laborer was viewed as less than. Later, city-dwelling citizens are seen rushing in crowds to take shelter in underground bunkers. They are a mass collection of visually lower-class people in great danger of an attack. Dr. Newton is among them and realizes that this isn't a shelter, it's a slaughter. The presumed safety of these people is actually useless, as they do not have the resources to protect themselves. So there is limited representation, as again, a lot of this movie takes place on a military base, and civilians, for the most part, were purposefully left out. There is a military versus working class dynamic that is set up, as the working class are viewed as less than. And then in a scene where we do see civilians, they are in danger because of their lack of resources. for protection. As far as presence of technology, both have to do with the Jaegers, starting with the drift, mentioned earlier with how Mako had to deal with her memory, and how Raleigh also has compartmentalized his trauma. We can see that as speaking into mental health, in terms of how we process trauma, or how we share it with other people. Once their minds are connected, other people can feel their pain and see those memories. So being able to share that and have someone to empathize or sympathize with you, to not bottle things up or compartmentalize. We see it as a piece of technology in the drift, but we can see it affecting people mentally, personally. And with that, again, also privacy control, that there is technology out there where someone can look into your mind. There is a breach of privacy there where you are giving up a sense of self, a sense of control and comfort, where you are sharing very deep and personal things with someone. And then the Jaegers, kind of on the other end of the drift, have a very strong exterior. They have a lot of tools and resources to protect themselves from the outside. So while on the inside people are struggling with the drift and their mental health, they can put on a hard exterior. And technology gives us a visual representation of that in the big, giant Jaeger robots. And then a little bit more, we briefly get to see Jaegers from different countries, and even kind of different eras. So we can see how technology is developed and used in different countries and societies, with there being like different models and features and sizes, depending on where they come from. The Pacific Rim universe or canon actually has expanded into different platforms. There is a sequel to this first Pacific Rim film. There are multiple comics. There's a novel. There's plenty of video games, including just like arcade games. So while I do enjoy this film, and it has a lot to say about sci-fi, it has taken that into different platforms, where everything there's nothing contradicting other parts of the canon. It is all very linear and cohesive. And then I have my bibliography where I use a lot of information from the movie and the IMDb page, and then the canon policy from the Pacific Rim wiki page. A giant collaboration of information there. So that is this presentation on Pacific Rim and a lot of the sci-fi elements that go into the movie.